Okay, so you want to dive into the world of rental properties. More specifically, wrapping your head around the financials. Well, you come to the right place. Today we're going to break down this thing called the four-square method.
Yeah, it's kind of like a secret decoder ring for rental properties. Helps you make sense of whether an investment is worth your hard-earned cash.
Love that. So to make it super practical, let's picture this, right? We've got a classic duplex. 2 units, side by side, maybe a little front porch action. You see those all over, right? Let's say this baby's on the market for $200,000.
All right, $200,000 duplex. I like it. Duplexes are super popular for a reason, solid investments when you run the numbers right, and that's where the four-square method comes in. Each square basically breaks down a different piece of the financial puzzle.
A financial puzzle. All right, I'm in. Lay it on me. What's the first piece we're looking at?
We always start with income, the heart and soul of any investment, right?
Makes sense.
And with rental properties, the most obvious income source is, well, the rent.
Yeah, no kidding. It's all about those monthly checks coming in. So let's talk about our $200,000 duplex. Say each unit rents for $1,000 a month. Not uncommon, right?
Yeah, so you're looking at a cool $2,000 a month in potential rental income.
$2,000 a month. That's not a bad start to the puzzle, but I have a feeling it's not always smooth sailing from there. Got to factor in the dreaded E word, expenses.
Expenses. Yeah, that's where a lot of new investors, they kind of trip up, you know? It's easy to get starry-eyed about the income and forget about all the costs that come with owning a property.
Okay, so give it to me straight. What kind of expenses should we brace ourselves for?
All right, so you've got two main buckets. First, you've got your recurring costs, stuff like property taxes, your insurance, and depending on how you set up the lease, maybe some utilities too.
Right. And don't forget about those lovely HOA fees.
Yeah.
If the property is part of a homeowners association, that can add up.
Absolutely, the HOA fees for sure. And then you've got this other category, variable costs. These can be a little less predictable, but just as important. We're talking repairs, the general upkeep, and then there are those big ticket items. Those are what we call capital expenditures, or CapEx for short.
CapEx sounds kind of scary.
A little bit, yeah. This is like when you need a whole new roof, right?
Yeah.
Or the HVAC system decides to call it quits. Maybe even some major plumbing or electrical work.
Yikes, those are not small things.
Nope. You got to be ready for them. Think of it as a rainy day fund, but for your property. And then there's one more expense a lot of people forget about, at least at first, vacancy.
Vacancy.
Yeah, because realistically, there will be times when the property is empty between tenants, you know.
Oh, right. It's not always a perfect handoff from one renter to the next.
Exactly. And during those vacant periods, you're still on the hook for the mortgage, the taxes, all that.
That's a really good point. Something you might not think about right away.
Yeah, and to account for that, when you're analyzing a property, you got to factor in a vacancy rate. It's basically a percentage of time you think the property might be vacant within a year.
So for our example, let's be a little cautious, yeah? Let's say a 5% vacancy rate. Just to be on the safe side with our calculations.
5%. Yeah, that's smart. Okay, so getting down to the nitty-gritty with this $200,000 duplex, let's say, property taxes, they run about $150 a month. Insurance, maybe another $100. And we'll throw in, how about another $100 for repairs and maintenance each month? Just a ballpark, of course.
Okay, so we're at $350 already, plus that $100 we're setting aside for potential vacancy.
We're not done yet. Remember that CapEx we talked about? Always good to budget for those bigger expenses. So let's tack on another $100 a month for that, just to be safe.
Right, got to keep that rainy day fund going. So that brings our monthly expenses to $550. Wait a minute. We haven't even talked about the mortgage yet.
You're absolutely right. Big one there. And of course, that monthly mortgage payment depends on a whole bunch of things. Your purchase price, what kind of down payment you put down, interest rates.
All right, well, for our hypothetical scenario, let's say we snag a 30-year mortgage on this duplex at, I don't know, a 5% interest rate.
Yeah.
And we put down a 20% down payment. Fairly standard, right?
Yeah, that's pretty typical. All right, so 20% down on a $200,000 property, that's a down payment of $40,000. With those numbers, you're looking at a monthly mortgage payment of, let's see, roughly $860. That includes both your principal and interest.
Okay, so adding that $860 mortgage payment to our running total of $550, we're looking at a grand total of $4,410 in monthly expenses for this duplex.
You got it. And keep in mind, there may be a few other little expenses sprinkled here and there. Like if you don't want to deal with being a hands-on landlord, you might hire a property manager, which means, yep, you guessed it, more fees.
It all adds up. So, listeners, we've got our income, we've got our expenses all laid out for this hypothetical duplex. The real question is How do those numbers actually stack up? What does the bottom line look like? Stay tuned, because in our next part, we're going to dive into this crucial concept of cash flow. You don't want to miss it. All right, so we've got our income all sorted out, and we've gone through all of those potential expenses. Now for the big question, the one everyone's thinking about, the cash flow question.
Exactly. Cash flow, that's the name of the game when it comes to rental properties. It's the money you actually get to put in your pocket each month after all those expenses are paid.
So it's kind of like the make or break number, right?
Yeah.
Tells you if you can actually afford to be a landlord or not.
That's a great way to put it. And the good news is calculating cash flow is actually pretty simple. You just subtract your total monthly expenses from your total monthly income. Boom, there it is.
All right, so let's do a little math recap here. Our hypothetical duplex is bringing in $2,000 a month in rent, right? And we landed on about $410 for our total monthly expenses.
Yep, you got those numbers down. So $2,000 in income minus $4,410 in expenses. That leaves us with a monthly cash flow of $590.
$590 a month. Okay, so in this scenario, you're basically getting paid $590 every month to own this duplex, assuming everything goes according to plan, of course, which, let's be real.
Right, real-world investing always throws you a curveball now and then. But hey, this positive cash flow we're seeing, it's definitely a good sign. Shows the potential this property has.
Now, is $590 considered a good cash flow? I mean, how do investors actually decide if a property is worth it based on that number?
Well, there's no magic number for what's considered good cash flow. It really all depends on your individual goals as an investor, how much risk you're comfortable with, and what's typical for the market you're in. Some people are happy with a couple $100 a month. Others are aiming for way more.
So it's all relative. Like, are you looking for some steady passive income, or are you trying to build a whole real estate empire?
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to understand how this cash flow number connects to other metrics, like your cash-on-cash return. That one's all about figuring out what kind of return you're actually getting on your investment.
Okay, cash-on-cash return. Break that down for me. What's the difference between that and cash flow? They sound kind of similar.
They are definitely related, but there's a key difference. Cash flow, like we've been talking about, that's the actual amount of money you've got left over at the end of the month. Cash-on-cash return, on the other hand, it takes that cash flow and puts it into perspective by showing you what percentage of your initial investment you're actually earning back each year.
Oh, okay. So it's like comparing apples to apples.
Yeah.
Helps you compare different investment opportunities fairly.
You got it. Imagine this. You're looking at two different properties, right? Property A, it gives you a higher monthly cash flow, but it also required a way bigger down payment. Property B, maybe lower cash flow, but you didn't have to put as much money down up front. Cash-on-cash return, that's what helps you figure out which property is actually giving you a better bang for your buck.
That makes a lot of sense. It's all about maximizing what you get back on that initial investment. So how do we actually calculate this cash-on-cash return? Hit me with the formula.
All right, let's break it down. First things first, we got to figure out what your total initial investment was. That means your down payment, those pesky closing costs everyone loves, and any upfront repairs or renovations you had to do to get the property rent ready.
So going back to our trusty duplex example, we had a 20% down payment, which came out to $40,000. And then let's say closing costs were about $3,000. We'll keep it simple and say no major renovations were needed, just to keep the numbers clean.
Perfect. So in this case, your total initial investment would be $43,000.
$43,000, got it. What's next in our cash-on-cash return calculation?
All right, so we take that $590 monthly cash flow and we multiply that by 12 because there are 12 months in a year. That gives us an annual cash flow of, let's see, $7,080.
$7,080 per year. I'm following along.
Awesome. Last step, we divide that annual cash flow, $7,080, by our total initial investment of $43,000.
Okay, time for some quick calculator action. All right, got it. That gives us a cash-on-cash return of 16.4%. Whoa, that seems really good. Is that a typical return for a rental property?
That's definitely on the higher end of the spectrum, but remember, we're working with a simplified example here. In the real world, there are 1,000,001 factors that can impact your actual returns.
True. But it does show you the potential, right?
Yeah.
Smart real estate investing, it can really pay off.
Absolutely, and that's why we're going through all this, right?
Yeah.
You got to understand these metrics to make smart decisions when you're evaluating different deals.
All right, listeners, we've tackled cash flow. We've unpacked this whole cash-on-cash return thing. But there's still one more square in our trusty four-square method, and you could argue it's the most exciting one of all: equity. Stick with us as we explore why equity is like the secret sauce, the magic ingredient that can turn your real estate investments into long-term wealth.
All right, so we've covered cash flow and we dug into cash on cash return, but now it's time to unleash the secret weapon of real estate equity.
Equity, equity, equity. It's where things get really exciting when we're talking about building long-term wealth. Simply put, it's the portion of the property you actually own, free and clear. So it's like you're gradually gaining more ownership over time, like you're chipping away at what you owe the bank, and your own stake in the property keeps growing.
Exactly. See, every time you make that dreaded mortgage payment, it's split into two parts: interest and principal. Interest, well, that's just the cost of borrowing the money. But the principal, that goes directly toward paying down your loan balance. And as that principal goes down, guess what? Your equity goes up.
So even if, hypothetically, the property value didn't change at all, you'd still be building equity with every single payment.
You got it. But here's the real kicker in the world of real estate. You've got this powerful force on your side, and it's called appreciation.
Appreciation. Music to a real estate investor's ears. What exactly does that mean?
Appreciation is basically just the increase in value of an asset over a period of time. And with real estate, history's on your side. Properties tend to go up in value over the long haul, thanks to things like inflation, good old supply and demand, and even just improvements happening in the neighborhood.
So as your property appreciates, your equity is growing even faster, right? Because you're paying down the loan and the property itself is becoming more valuable at the same time.
You're getting it. It's a double whammy of wealth building. And to really see how this works in action, let's go back to our duplex.
Okay, so our trusty duplex, it was listed at $200,000. Now let's fast forward, say, 5 years down the line. The market's looking good, properties in the area are selling like hotcakes, prices are up.
Let's say, just for kicks, that after 5 years of appreciation, your duplex is now worth, I don't know, $300,000.
Whoa, okay, so we're talking a $100,000 increase in value. That's huge.
Right. Now imagine this. You've been making your mortgage payments on time, like a responsible investor, and that loan balance has been shrinking. Let's say after 5 years, you still owe $120,000.
Okay, so the property's worth $300,000. I owe $120,000. Wait a minute, that means my equity is $180,000.
Ding, ding, ding. You got it. You've basically quadrupled your initial investment of $43,000 in just 5 years. And that's not even counting all the cash flow you've been pocketing along the way.
That's amazing. So not only are you bringing in that passive income every month, but your money's working hard for you behind the scenes, potentially growing like crazy thanks to appreciation and paying down that mortgage.
Exactly. That is the power of equity, my friend. It's definitely a long game. It takes time. But it's one of the biggest reasons why people are so drawn to real estate as a wealth-building strategy.
Wow, listeners, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty pumped about the possibilities here. It's clear we've just barely scratched the surface of what there is to learn about rental property investing.
Just the tip of the iceberg.
So for our listeners who are fired up and want to keep exploring, what kind of resources would you recommend?
If you're ready to dive into the nitty-gritty, the BiggerPockets rental property calculator is like a superpower. It's totally free to use. You can plug in all sorts of details: the purchase price, expenses, financing options, even different appreciation rates. Really see how different factors impact your potential return.
It's like having a crystal ball for real estate. I love it. What about connecting with other investors, getting advice from people who already been there, done that?
I'd say check out the free weekly webinars over at BiggerPockets. They've got experts covering all kinds of topics, you name it: finding deals, analyzing properties, becoming a master tenant manager.
It's like a crash course in real estate investing, but you can do it from your couch.
Exactly. And the best part, they often analyze real-life deals so you can see how these concepts play out in the real world.
Awesome. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. We've demystified the four-square method, tackled income and expenses, and explored the magic of cash flow and equity. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling ready to go find some deals.
Me too. Knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely. And remember, everyone, if you're thinking about taking that leap into the world of real estate, do your homework. Use the incredible resources out there. Maybe even join a webinar or two. Until next time, happy investing.